All right, welcome to episode 8 of the Totum Realty Advisors podcast, brought to you today by Knob Creek 12, which, spoiler alert, not a fan. Yeah, not a fan. Are you a fan?
Well, I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt, and after the first drink, we'll make a decision.
Yeah, I think by the end it's going to still be the same for me. Not a fan.
Yeah.
But current events, some crazy conversation going on valuations in this wonderful world of real estate between our former president, Mr. Trump, and his, I guess they were his advisor at the time, Cushman and Wakefield. So appraisals are an interesting piece of the puzzle.
Well,
who's going to go first? Look at you two.
You're
both not sure where to go.
I'm going to go first, and it has absolutely nothing to do with.
I'm going to try to play the strong silent role on this week's podcast
with our beloved president, number 45. Appraisals are a tool, and they're used by every party. I would like to say it is just an absolute impartial valuation of a property, but that's not accurate. You have an appraisal done to make an argument, to place a value on something. If you are trying to contest your taxes, you want your property to come in at less value. If you're trying to leverage your property, you want it to be more valuable. If you're trying to work...
So hold on, I got to pause you right there. So it is art, not science?
It is absolutely art, and some of it is pretty ugly art, as a matter of fact. And the art is done on both sides of the table. When a bank will value and order their own appraisal to value your property after the loan is in place, they want the lowest possible value. You want a higher possible value. When a property is being taken by some form of a Department of Transportation taking or
eminent
domain taking or something of that nature, the government who's taking your property wants the value to be significantly lower. In fact, there's rules as to what it's not the appraiser that would take it, it's whatever their contracting officer would be, that he is allowed, personally allowed, to go 15% above an appraised value to get something done, at least depending on the jurisdiction that you're talking about. So there's all sorts of liberal ethics when it comes to approaching valuation of property. So it's not just Donald Trump, it's probably every real estate developer on the planet, every real estate owner on the planet, every homeowner that says, oh, my property is worth X. Every municipality that wants to increase the value of your property, everyone makes an argument regarding the valuation of a property. It's just the nature of how they have to keep score of it. Is there something that's 100% accurate? No. Appraisals are even done with different methods of finding the appraisal.
What are the methods?
Okay, there's the cost approach. What does it cost me to reproduce this particular property? Okay, that's one. There's the sales comparable approach. What did other properties that were like this sell for? Well, that's completely subjective because what are you using as sale comparables? Okay, what are you using for cost if you're talking about the other one? Are you using costs in the Southwest? Are you using cost in the Northeast? Your labor costs are 1,000% different. Are you doing costs for a building in a right-to-work state, or are you doing costs in a merit state or a union state? And then another method is probably the truest commercial valuation is the income approach. What does this actual property produce? But all that you're doing is you're judging a cash flow that should have an objective value to it. And that is probably the most objective value that you're going to get out of a property. What does it produce? How long is it going to be producing it? And then the real estate is almost, it's not considered as important, though it is valued someplace in there.
So
go ahead. I wanted to flip it back to you anyway, so where were you going to go?
Back to you, Paige.
Yeah.
So thinking about an income approach, would you say that a firm or an appraiser tasked with evaluating an asset, an income-producing commercial asset, with the income approach, are you, as the person, the professional performing that valuation, only as good at evaluating it as the information that you're provided?
100%.
Yes, but they are, as a professional, they are tasked to find the information themselves. Let's.
But how could you? I mean, we've been through this. I mean, with some of our clients that we've provided valuations for, you rely on them to provide you with the income statements and the P&Ls, and our valuations are only as good as the information that they provide us. So I guess that is my question here is, I read the article yesterday, Cushman & Wakefield is now being audited on all of their valuations, but where does the responsibility lie? And at what point, when someone presents you with these reports, do you say, oh, those don't seem right? How would you know as the person performing the valuation?
Okay, let's just take, by way of example, a Cushman & Wakefield valuation, and let's just use a property that is owned by the former president. Okay, Trump Tower. Everyone knows what Trump Tower is.
Which
Great
city?
building, right?
Which Trump Tower?
Okay, the original Trump Tower in New York.
Okay.
Okay, Trump Tower has three different components to it. There's a retail component, there's a residential component, and there's an office component. Okay, all three of them will carry different kinds of valuation. Okay, but retail, I believe Trump Tower's on the Fifth Avenue, correct? I believe it's on Fifth Avenue.
Okay.
Okay, Trump Tower's on Fifth Avenue. Retail on Fifth Avenue has a very long history of comparable values. You can find out what FAO Schwartz leases for, what Tiffany will lease for, what Bergdorf, what Fortunoff. Go right up and down the street. You will find what the retail value should be for that particular property.
You're saying lease comps?
Lease comps.
Yeah, like what they'll
lease
pay.
comps, and
Okay.
if you're going
I
to
just
do
wanna make
an
sure I'm
income,
understanding what you're
if you're
saying.
going to do an income approach on that, okay, that's a very legitimate.
But do those
way-
comps even matter? Because what really matters is
Is the
what is
income.
coming in today, right? The income today.
Absolutely, and you're going to value it as is that a viable lease comp?
Meaning, is it like
Is Tiffany-
representative of the
is
market?
representative of what the market says, and isn't, if you're going to value it, you're going to, as.
But isn't that
But
like what
why are we talking
the
about lease
fatal
comps?
flaw
Why are we
with
talking about lease
appraisals?
comps? Because it's actual revenue incoming. It's not a. It should be based on the actual revenue streams incoming, right? What the actual leases at that point in time are showing is revenue minus the expenses, and that, right? I mean,
Yeah,
why
I mean,
does
if
it
it's
why does it
occupied-
rely on
Okay.
lease comps?
But when you value that, say this is the value that's coming in, okay? Let's just say that the value of that particular lease is $100 per square foot net. In a market, okay, that has a $90 per square foot net average revenue. Well, the question will be, why is that? Okay, so every appraiser has to make that subjective judgment. There's a line in how they value it. Why did I make this subjective judgment? Is it because of its location right there? Is it because of the tenant mix? Is it because of this? Certain properties are going to value there's going to be a little bit of a fluctuation there.
So you're saying
And-
it's a balance between actual current income versus what the market income could be for a comparable asset with comparable leases in place.
This is the art form that Kevin speaks of, that
That was just
Yes.
purely a question to make sure I'm
Absolutely.
understanding your train of thought.
yes, that's how it is. Certain properties will have a little bit more, let's just say, panache. The Plaza Hotel, well,
Right. So
the Plaza Hotel is going to carry more of a room revenue than the Sheraton.
But that's not panache. That's actual hard dollars coming in versus costs going out.
Well, why does someone pay the hard dollar versus the cost going out? There's something that they're providing that has a little bit more snap to it.
But we're not
Does
talking about
tr-
what the consumer is paying. We're talking about the valuation of the
Yeah,
asset, the
okay,
real estate.
But you're asking, why is okay, I have to take a step back here. Okay, you're asking why is this something that will have a discrepancy in the valuation? It is not a fixed, hard number, okay? One appraiser is going to say it's worth this, another appraiser is going to say it's worth that.
But if you're using the income approach, why isn't it?
Because he's going to say that this is worth more because of this is where it is. It's on this side of Fifth Avenue versus this side of Fifth Avenue.
But that's why you compare the income approach valuation method with the sales comparable or the a market comp
But the income
and
approach,
mesh the two of those valuations
the
together.
income approach will have a subjective value attached to it also.
But why? That's the question I'm asking.
I think
Well,
that goes back to
I
what
think
is-
it's a
what is
great
the-
question, and it's really like at the end of the day, and I haven't studied the Cushman-Trump thing. Like,
But you studied appraisals.
yeah, and I have got a strong opinion that I'm trying to be objective about. At the end of the day, why is it so subjective? Like, it should be more scientific. And I think, Paige, you're making a good point. Like, you're learning this business and you're trying to figure out, like, why is there such discrepancy? And there really shouldn't be the discrepancy as it relates to an income approach. Like, it kind of should be, it is what it is. But there is, as you well pointed out, Michael, a lot of discrepancy. There's a lot of art, depending on who's ordered the appraisal, who's paying for the appraisal. Like, it is, everybody thinks, well, whatever the appraisal says is what it is. And it's
Absolutely.
just, it's nonsense.
It
It's
is.
nonsense. It's I'm paying for an opinion.
And we have an industry built on an opinion of value via an appraisal, who then can get a bank loan. And listen, I'm not, picking sides in Cushman versus Trump or Trump versus whatever. But I do feel bad for Cushman that they probably did, to the best of their ability, put a value on something, and now they're going to get crucified for it.
And that's the thing. I mean, we experience it too. Like, we create these valuations. Obviously, we research comps, we research lease comps, we research sales comps. We consider the cost of reproduction of an asset. But then the income approach, which on revenue producing assets is, I would say it carries the weight of how we attribute value to an asset. And we rely on income statements and P&Ls from our clients to derive those numbers. So that's what I'm, as Kevin's saying, sympathetic to the Cushman-Wakefield situation. And how could a firm prevent themselves from being in the same scenario?
Well, there's such a big problem here because there's so many moving parts to it. Okay, you just said the income approach is the absolute best way of valuing it. Well, what if there's no income? What if it's an empty building? Then you have to look at it from a different perspective, and I would go back to think about it as your home. If you have your home, you're not going to use the income approach on your home.
I mean, some people do. Like, if you think of it, some people
Sure.
value it.
And
They'll use the income approach, but they'll do a pro forma NOI to come up with a value that's not even, they're attributing value to vacant space. So
I
it's,
agree, they will do that, and is that the most accurate? This is because you have three different ways of looking at the same problem, and you're going to have interpretation, and people have different interpretations. That it just has this subjectivity that is just built in, it's inherent to the problem. And yet someone is going to decide, this is the amount of money that I'm going to leverage. Now, why?
But if you're John Doe, hold on. If you're John Doe and you want to get a loan, or let's even like step away from John Doe. If you're,
leave him alone.
Yeah, leave him. If you're
He gets enough
Paige
shit.
M and you're a banker
me alone.
and you want to make a loan, you're the institution, like the bureaucracy of the banking world has said it needs to appraise or I can't give you this loan, right? So if you're in those shoes, you want the appraisal to work. And then you influence the appraisal to make sure that you can loan on that asset.
But, and I have a question.
okay,
I'm not
well-
disagreeing, but I have a question. But is that only a scenario, like if you're trying to take out debt on it. Whereas if you're trying to argue an assessment to lower your tax basis, that is something where
Well, then the
it's
roles are
strictly
reversed.
the owner
It's strictly
that is
the owner.
concerned
Well,
about it.
who's
The banker
paying
doesn't
for it?
care. It's all about who's paying for it.
Right, and that's
Okay.
what I'm wondering. Like, is it? I was having this conversation again at the nail salon last night, just sharing the tea,
I got
Sharing the what? What is that?
spilling the tea,
Oh,
sharing the tea.
yeah, I got to get my nails
That's what the
done.
kids are saying these days.
I don't even know what that means.
There was a
but-
woman there talking about how she just bought a house, or she bought a house a year and a half ago. They just got the reassessment, and it raised her mortgage payment by $300 a month. And
Oh, the taxes went up
correct,
$300 a month. Correct.
yes. So, and the same thing happened to me when I bought my house.
Which is
and
like $4,000 a year.
but the second I hired an attorney, the attorney had gone to law school with the person who
Solicitor, probably.
someone from the school board who,
Right.
appealed what I was paying in taxes, and just called him up and was like, "Hey, bro, why are we doing this?" And he's like, "Yeah, you're right. Let's not." And it's like the second you hire an attorney, it fixes. So like the larger point that I'm getting at here is it just the people with the most resources can make happen what they want to happen in these scenarios? Because had I not hired an attorney, I would still be paying the absurd. They doubled my property value when I bought it. So, if you don't lawyer up, if you don't have the resources to spend money on these different things, these professionals that can help you navigate this, or like, does the person who carries the biggest stick get their way here?
I think that's, usually when you hire an attorney for a certain reason too, okay, because he's going to make an argument on your behalf. All right, you can make the same argument. The question is your argument going to be as effective as the attorney's is? And I would say that the attorney's is going to be better because he's made the argument more. He knows what points to make regarding that. Anybody can contest their taxes. Okay, anyone can contest the value of something. If you go to take out a mortgage, you can not agree with the bank's appraisal. Okay, now at the end of the day, is that something that makes sense? Does it make sense just to go get a different bank and use a different appraiser? You can get a contesting appraiser, but it's up to the bank's loan committee to decide whether they're going to give you the loan or not and what appraisal that they're going to believe. It is just, the point is that it's just completely subjective.
Well, and I guess, like, how does it become not subjective? I mean, because that's the whole
It's endemic to the
intent,
problem.
but-
that's the whole argument about this whole Cushman Wakefield thing, is that there's no transparency in the valuation process, and so now they're talking about. I mean, and maybe they're not even talking about it yet; they're still investigating it, but.
The problem with the Cushman and Wakefield thing is that it's out there and Cushman and Wakefield's name is attached to something that Donald Trump did, or they said Donald Trump did, and now they're being
I don't think that's
persecuted
the problem.
for
I
it.
think the problem is that
Oh,
there's-
I don't know about that.
I mean, I think there's a lack of understanding about how different things are.
I mean,
The whole process. I think there's a lack of
realistically,
understanding about
our
the
clients
process.
have not all of them, but there's many of them who don't understand that appraisals are art and not science. And we spend a lot of time educating on that. Like, they're like, oh, but the appraisal said this. Well, unfortunately, like, that was at a moment in time by one person's opinion.
And the point is that it's an opinion of value. That's what an appraisal is. It's an opinion of value by someone who has gone through whatever courses they've gone through when it's signed off by a master appraiser. Okay? But that is his opinion. How do you say Cushman and Wakefield did something wrong
When it was his opinion.
when it's
or
an
her
opinion? Somebody else might have a different opinion.
Right.
What is happening in the Cushman and Wakefield thing is they're trying to besmirch the 45th president, and they're just caught up in the vortex of what it is. My point is that everybody does it on both sides. If you are the taxing authority, I'm increasing your assessment. Well, why? oh, well, you added that pool over there, or you extended your driveway over here, or you finished off that room there, or the cost of reproducing this is going to be higher. Taxes will typically go up constantly. Does that mean the value of your home is going up constantly? No. But taxes will go up constantly, and they will tax you every year. In where I live, if the taxes do not increase, if your assessment does not increase by 10%, they do not have to tell you. Well, you know damn well your assessment is going up 9% every single year. That's just the nature of the beast, because the taxes are what they use to fund government programs. So that's going up. So it's everyone has to have their opinion and make their argument of one side or the other. What the appraisal is, it's an instrument, it's a tool to say, no, you're wrong, this says this, and it's your argument against this, your expert against theirs. So, and then someone's going to believe one way or the other. So an appraiser by its very nature, or appraisal by its very nature, is not going to match. One person's opinion is going to be different from another. In fact, I would say it's a rarity that those things will come through. Which brings me to another rabbit hole.
Oh, boy.
Well, do you remember in negotiating leases when we're going to use the quote-unquote 3 appraiser method? You do recall that,
Yeah.
right?
Can for the lay person or Paige Myers,
There used to be what's called the 3 appraiser method, and it was this just long, voluminous clause that was put into leases that said, if we can't agree to what the renewal rate is going to be, and the renewal rate was quote unquote at market, if we can't agree to what the renewal rate is, you will get your appraiser and I will get my appraiser, and then if those two can't come to an agreement, we'll get a 3rd appraiser, and then we'll settle someplace within the middle of what all
and
those
if that
appraisals
doesn't
are.
work, we'll all arm wrestle.
Yeah.
May the best man win.
It's literally spaghetti against a wall. And, I'm going to get my guys and you're going to get your guys, and all of a sudden there's going to be a third-party guy. And the third-party guy has an allegiance to the 2 appraisers. He's going to pick the number in the middle. So it was just this ludicrous attempt to try to figure out what is market. But what it really did was it illustrated the farce that's appraisal. I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying farce, aren't I? Because
I do feel like
I don't want to diss an entire industry, because the appraisal industry is a huge thing.
we've officially accomplished that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Can we
to
cut that?
Gary and all of your other friends out there who are appraisals, sorry. But yeah.
No,
it's
but I mean,
tough.
it just what, they don't hear it when
Right.
we start drinking anyways?
Right. Well, I mean, so I feel like we need to shift gears 100% and go from
I was gonna say I'll leave you to reel that back in.
to art, or from art to science. So I think we collectively agree.
I'll let you
I'm good.
choose not to drink
I
that.
told you it is not my cup of tea.
Get one that you like.
That's all right. So we've agreed that there is art there, and it's confusing and it's complicated. But then there's this other thing called science, which then draws into an issue, usable versus rentable. And we're dealing with that with a client right now.
That
So
was
what
a
the heck
leap.
does
That
that
was a
mean?
leap on bringing that back. But
Yeah.
the topic outside of current
I thought I
events
did
that we
a pretty
wanted to
good
talk
job, yeah.
about today is, is usable versus rentable square footage.
What the heck does that mean?
Yes. So, again, being the newbie here and prior to, even for 6 months in this industry, I didn't understand. We had a great little Kevin Riley whiteboard session that helped illustrate the difference. But basically, we see it all the time. And if you don't live in this industry or work in this industry on a daily basis, it's not surprising. People get very caught up in how many square feet is a space and what's the rent per square foot. But what most people don't know is that when someone says, hey, I have a 5,500 square foot space available for rent, that 5,500 square foot encompasses 10 to 20% of unusable square footage, whether it be, corridors, common areas, a lobby, a gym,
Elevator shafts, stairwells, penetrations, ventilation shafts.
Take the mic, Michael. No.
No,
Right.
no,
but
it
people don't
encompasses all the
realize that.
non-occupiable space.
Right. So if you think that, calculation's sake, you need 3,500 square feet to accommodate your team, the fact of the matter is you're going to be paying for 10 to 15% more. I mean,
Yeah,
what do
I
you
think
think the
that's a
common core factors are?
I think the common for like suburban suburban office space, 10 to 15% is
Yeah.
a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, I mean, the rule of thumb, when, I started in the industry
Decades
years ago, when General Washington was leading our country.
Jesus.
No, it was, if you were a full floor tenant, you were 8 to 10% of the core factor because you didn't have the corridors. You just had to pay for the stairwells and everything else. And if you were a common tenant that had multiple tenants on a floor, you had the common corridor scenario, and 15 to 18% was an acceptable number. Now, there are certain buildings that were built with certain type of design features that drive the core up. Big, huge atriums, that kind of thing. I think what's the big driver to change that number right now are the amenities that are in buildings. But let's not go to the amenity component of it yet. You do have to pay for the things that you use, but you use in common with somebody else.
Right.
And-
The example I always use is the restrooms. Like, do you want your restroom in your space, or do you want it to be shared with other people?
Yeah.
And I think not enough companies think critically about that, because I think there's some definite pros and cons to having restrooms in your space or in common. But you have to pay for that space. So when you, this always cracks me up. Like when someone says, I leased 2,000 square feet or 20,000 square feet, if they went and actually measured it, no, they really didn't get 2,000 or 20,000 square feet. They got whatever the square footage is plus, oh, by the way, the restrooms, the corridors, the elevators, and all of that.
In most
stuff.
cases, but that's not across the board. Every building, the way it's laid out, the way it's set up, if you're in a single floor business park and you have direct entry right into your suite, maybe there isn't a common factor or core factor. So every building, that's why we stress to our clients, it's never apples to apples until you understand those details. Every building's core factor is going to be different. So just saying, oh, this is a 5,000 square foot space in this building for $20 a square foot, and here's a 7,000 square foot space for 18 or even $25 a
Right.
square foot. Until you know the common factor, you can't really gauge anything on an apples to apples basis.
And here's the problem, okay? Because the typical method of measurement is the BOMA method, correct?
Yep.
The Building and Office Management Association method of measurement. And every building is typically measured by a modified BOMA, which means by its very nature,
So here's my wild ass guess, but
here's what I
I was
have
trying to go
measured.
from art to science, and you're saying it's all art.
But no, but
It's
it's
real
the majority of it is
Yes.
art, and I think I've measured it. I mentioned this in another podcast. Was that the first thing I would do if I purchased a building is I would remeasure it, because it's a different interpretation of what it is, and you will increase your square footage, and it's there. Everything has a subjective component to it, and people will argue on one side and argue on another, and that's what the negotiation aspect of it is.
So if you're a tenant, do you measure your space?
I was just going to ask that. What do you think the percentage is of people who actually remeasure their spaces? Like if you had to guess.
If I had to guess,
Yeah.
1%.
Michael, if you had to guess.
I would disagree with that simply because the largest tenant
Oh, it was a shock of my life.
the largest tenant in the United States of America is the General Services Administration, and they don't use either of it. They use an occupiable and a usable square footage measurement that only they can do it, and they measure their space constantly. But I would agree. Most people do not measure their space. Most people do not measure their space.
And really, should they? I mean, at the end of the day, does it really matter?
It's one of those
I mean,
things
yeah.
where
Does it?
I think for some tenants, yeah. I mean, if you're
it's a possibility. I don't think it wouldn't be the hill that I die on.
But hold on, why do you think that it is something that really matters?
well, I'm not going to try to do mental math right now after a beer and a bourbon, but if you're talking, I mean, depending on the scale of the space that you're talking about,
Uh-huh.
or depending on the budget of the client. I mean, we work with some clients that the difference of 100 square feet, if it's, $20 a square foot on a month, I mean, that is, once you count all the pass-throughs and everything else, that becomes a substantial add up over the course of a lease. So, I mean, maybe I'm just a frugal asshole, but I think it's important.
And I think that's a good point. But the point being
The
that
point
the
is
tenant
that
is
everybody should measure
Yeah.
their space.
the tenant is so small that there's a pretty good chance that it's not going to. You're not going to have the leverage to.
No, but if it's off
Change.
by 10%, 10% is 10%.
10%
regardless.
is a big. Now
Right.
it's an argument.
Think
you
about
make, but not
10% of
about-
your bottom line.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's
an
not
argument in the other
insignificant.
It's not 10%.
And nobody does
but
it.
It will be
Nobody
a
does
percentage
it.
point.
Nobody does it.
And
Yeah.
every lease we read is like subject to tenant measurement.
And then nobody measures it. Fascinating.
Now, I think the real question that we face in the future is there is an amenity war going on in buildings now. And a building has a certain size. And now if you're taking space that's outside of What was
Usable
once-
space, it's rentable. We
what
kinda
was
talked
once
about
a
this little bit.
rentable space, now it's going to be a conference center or a tenant lounge or a gym or a bike
Nap
storage
room.
or a nap room or
A mother's
whatever,
room.
or whatever else they're going
Whatever
to
they call
call
these
that.
rooms. I don't even know.
Now, if it becomes a common space, it changes the entire dynamic of that rentable, usable number. And that space still has to be heated, cleaned, paid taxes on, occupied for the most part, all the common costs that you would have had. But it changes the whole equation. And so that's one of those things that you have to be extremely, extremely cautious of. And think of it.
So hold on.
And also-
So I'm going to wrap this up because I'm.
Oh, wait, but I have a good point.
Oh.
Maybe.
A good point, or you want to make a
Beauty's
point?
in the eye of the beholder. But you see a lot of leases that will state in the lease that the landlord has the right to
Change the building.
change the percentage allocation, like the pro rata share of the tenant.
Yes.
So the tenant could be in the building for 5 years at 10,000 square feet, but if you don't catch that in a lease, the landlord can say, okay, yeah, you're still in the same amount of square footage, but your pro rata share has gone from 15% to 25% because we took all of this other rentable area out of play. Now you got to share that. So if that's something too that I think people would typically overlook, that can have huge impacts as we're talking about transitioning previously rentable space into amenity space to keep up with the amenity demands of the post-pandemic current consumer that's looking to use their office space as a
100% right in the
recruitment
fairway.
tool.
In addition to that, they possibly have the ability to pass through the cost of converting the space.
Yeah, all
which
the
is a whole
capital
nother topic.
expenditures. Yeah.
Sorry,
A
so
whole nother
you're both
topic.
getting put on the spot. How many tenants in Pittsburgh right now are paying for the appropriate amount of square foot or square footage? Meaning, like their lease says 10,000 square feet. What percentage of the people are actually in 10,000 feet? Do you think?
I mean, I feel like you just recycled my question. I feel like it's 1%. It's the people who measured their space. Maybe it's less than 1% because it's the people who measured their space, but then had the wherewithal to be like, hey, you can't recalculate my pro rata share.
What do you think? 40 years in the business.
None. Now,
Fascinating. My mentor literally said the one non-negotiable thing is whatever I tell you the square footage of your space is, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Think about that.
And
Because
I
he
would
knows
say-
that it's none.
The guy that's closest, but I would almost guarantee that none of them are accurate. The guy's the closest is the one that has the entire building. But I would say none.
Yeah, it's crazy.
None of them know what the actual square footage is.
Fascinating.
or paying the
Everything we
appropriate
do
amount.
is based
Yeah.
on a per square foot basis.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
It's crazy.
And
We need
just
to dig
to
into
bring
this.
it home really
Yeah?
quickly,
Okay.
though.
Bring it home.
I mean, it's a lot of pressure.
She's
you
gonna
know-
smack you.
Yeah. your clock's going to get punched when we're done here, Michael.
I got to tell you, that was a pretty stiff look there.
All right, bring it home.
We do, when we do financial analyses for our clients, the core factor is, because I can just see clients reaching out. Not that anyone listens to this, but I can see them reaching out if they were to, and being like, hey, we never measured our space. WTF. Without measuring the space, we do still account for, but it's still, I mean, truthfully, like, maybe I should get a laser measure. I don't know. We account for that core factor in the financial analysis we do for lease spaces. But yes, I don't think people measure their space.
No. And they pay per square foot. It's crazy. You go to the grocery store and you buy turkey, you pay per pound.
You can weigh it.
You can weigh it.
Maybe we need.
And nobody does it.
Nobody weighs.
It's fascinating. So, 40 years, 20 years, couple years, collectively, we all have the same opinion that it is a wild, wild universe.
I mean, all I can say is I hope they still keep making ceiling grids 2x2 or 2x4 because.
Don't tell anybody. That's like cheating.
Okay.
Hold on. No.
I gotta tell you.
If you ever see me looking like a crazy lunatic, just like walking the perimeter of the space, that's what I'm doing. I'm counting your
Do you-
ceiling tiles and multiplying by 2 or 4.
Do you know what the dimensions
can't
of
say I
a
never
2x4
measured.
are?
All
A
right,
ceiling
what?
tile or a 2x4?
A 2x4.
She was talking about a ceiling tile.
I
Those are
know.
2x4.
He's down the off the rails with
I'm
another
saying
Oh my
conspiracy
gosh.
theory. Here
the
we go.
dimensions
They're
of a
not
2x4 are not 2x4.
Right.
It's a quarter inches short.
Try explaining that.
Looks
to
like
your-
a 5'9" male measured. You know, a 5'9" male was like, yeah, it's 2x4.
It's my point.
It's
just
1
that
1/4
we are-
by 3.
Unfortunately, we do not have the tolerances to send a spaceship to Mars.
All right, this is officially
We're in
off
a
the rails.
Different.
All right, guys, it's been great.
Completely.
Episode 8.
Episode 8 is awesome. Knob, whatever this awful bourbon is. What is it?
Knob Creek. I like it.
Knob
for
Creek.
the
You're
record.
in? Yes or no?
Yeah,
Yeah?
I like it.
Knob
You?
Creek is
I
a
like
very
it.
fine product. This just might not be one that you like the taste.
Okay.
'Cause,
So you're
I
in?
mean,
This
no,
particular blend
yes
is not
or no?
is
Yeah
not
or-
my. It's very. Yeah, I don't mind it.
What the heck was that?
what?
Other than a non-answer.
No, I
Do
would have.
you
I'm
want-
going to have another one.
Okay.
Okay.
Paige is in.
I'm in.
I'm finding a new bourbon. So
Okay.
thanks for watching.
Thank you
All
very
We'll go to
right.
much.
episode 9.
We'll try to do better next time.